Welcome back to Cooking with Gerald. On today's episode, I'll be making red velvet cheesecake. Alright guys, so today I'm making red velvet cheesecake. And the ingredients you're going to need is a basic cheesecake batter recipe, which if you go on to my YouTube channel, you'll be able to see a demonstration of mine. But I'm going to make it like a New York cheesecake, which is 4 blocks of cream cheese, about a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. It calls for 2 eggs, but I'm using 3. 3/4 cup of heavy whipping cream, and about 1 to 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract, and a cup and a half of sugar. So that's going to be for the recipe for the cheesecake. Now I'm making a red velvet cheesecake, so what I'm going to be doing that's going to be different is I'll be adding some red gel food coloring. This is the best because you don't have to use that much of it, and because you don't have to use that much of it, your cheesecake, or even if you're doing red velvet cake, is not going to taste bitter like it does when you use those liquid tubes of food coloring. Also, I have some red velvet extract too. I'm going to put a teaspoon of that in there. Excuse me. Red velvet is pretty much like an off chocolate. It's like a cake that has a slight taste of chocolate in it. So that's how it goes. So instead of me using the cocoa, I'm just going to use the red velvet extract. If I didn't have the extract, then I would use probably about 1/4 cup of melted chocolate that I would just add to the batter. But because I have that, I already have that. And then the last thing is some red velvet cake. So let me go ahead and get my Springform pan. All right, so I have my Springform pan, and then I also have, this is an 8-inch Springform pan, and I have a 9-inch, or is this 9? This is a 10-inch. No, 9-inch cake pan. I'm making what's called a bain-marie, which is pretty much you putting something down in water to steam it, so you don't want the cheesecake to crack when you're cooking it. So that steam gives it that extra bit of moisture. If it's dry heat and no steam, then what'll happen is it will crack. So I wrap some of my full sheet around that. I do that with all my cheesecakes. And I also have some parchment. The only reason I'm using parchment paper is because I have the cake in here. If it was just a regular graham cracker crust or chocolate cookie crust, I wouldn't use the parchment. So there that goes. Go ahead and get the pan ready with the red velvet cake. And you can make this crust as thick as you like it or as thin as you like it. It is a red velvet cheesecake, so you want to be able to taste the red velvet. So I'm going to start with that. Hopefully you guys can see everything you need to. Oh, you know what? Ouch. That's even taller. All right. So I like to crumble, and my hands are clean. If you don't wash your hands before you cook, bake, or anything, something's wrong with that. I don't know why people always make comments, like when I'm watching other people's videos and stuff, about always saying that their hands are clean. That to me is common sense, that you should be washing your hands before you are touching food, especially if it's not, if it doesn't belong to you, or you're not the only person that's actually eating it. I'm over here talking and I got the cake down below. Parchment. All right. All right, so now that I've crumbled this up, I'll press it down. I think I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of it. It's not gonna be enough for a cake anyway. I'm making this for someone, so it'll probably be about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches of cake. If you are making one for yourself at home, I would suggest getting the large Springform pan and basically cooking a layer of the red velvet cake the same size as the Springform pan. And usually, with most cake recipes, it's usually about 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches, depending on what size your cake pan is, that the cake will actually be. All right, so we got that done. And I can go ahead and set that to the side. So the next thing I'm going to do is add my cream cheese. And this cream cheese has been sitting out at room temperature for a couple hours. And that's the way you want it, to prevent it from being clumpy. If it's too cold and you don't know how to properly mix it, it will be clumpy. I usually, a lot of times, use it right out of the refrigerator, and that's because I've been baking cheese. I've probably baked about, no exaggeration, over 1 million cheesecakes. So there's been times when I didn't have time to let it cool to room temperature and didn't want to put it in the microwave. So I would just go ahead and blend it up that way. And really, to be quite honest, the cold cream cheese to me made a better batter because of it being so cold. It fluffs up a lot better, so you get more volume in your batter, whereas with room temperature you don't. Which, that doesn't make sense, but it doesn't make sense, but it does. But that's the way that it is. All right, one more. So I'm gonna go ahead and start this and then go ahead and add my sugar. Now, the one thing that you don't want to do is overmix this, because that can create cracks in your cheesecake as well. And especially if the cheesecake is not at room temperature. Or not cheesecake, but the cream cheese. So this recipe calls for about 1.5 cups of sugar. I usually put 2 cups of sugar in my cream cheese batters. Sometimes I'll do the 1.5 cups, depending on what type of cheesecake it is. If it isn't sweetened with different fruits or stuff like that, or even like with chocolate. With chocolate, I would just do 1.5 cups because there's sugar inside of the chocolate. But it's at your discretion as to how much you want to use. And then also, I'm going to put the cornstarch. Only going to use a couple tablespoons. This helps with structure because a New York cheesecake is different from a regular cheesecake because it has less eggs in it. So the cheesecake is going to be more dense. And also too, with the regular New York cheesecake, you can put lemon zest or a teaspoon of lemon lemon juice in there. But because this flavor is different, just like if it was chocolate, I wouldn't put the lemon extract in there. All right, so we're going to and as you can see, the batter is nice and smooth, and no lumps. So I'm going to go ahead and add the eggs in there one at a time. See how it clumps up with the eggs? So you want to make sure you add them one at a time and make sure it's thoroughly mixed. And then spread down the sides, because the eggs tend to make the cream cheese batter stick to the sides of the bowl. Extract. What you're doing is just by eye. It's about 2 tablespoons. I make my vanilla extract from scratch. If you go to my YouTube channel, you can see how I do it. It's a lot cheaper than buying it, and it's a lot better. Because you get to pick the type of quality of vanilla beans that you want to use. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is scrape this down again, because you definitely don't want any lumps, because this cheesecake is going to be colored. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add my 3/4 cup of cream. I'm going to go ahead and scrape again. And that pretty much is it for the batter for the regular cheesecake. Now also, if there are some lumps in here, what you can do is you can run this through a strainer, a mesh strainer. You just push it through, and that'll allow you to take the what you call them, the clumps out. Is one of these. So I'm going to take some of this out because I'm not going to use this entire thing of batter. If I need more, I'll add more, but I doubt that I will. All right, so I took out about a cup. So now what I'm going to do is add my red velvet. A teaspoon. And my food color. I get this from Hobby Lobby. This brand has been the best brand for me. And as you'll see, I'm not even going to use that much. Probably about a teaspoon, and that's it. Excuse me, we'll see how this is, because we don't want it to be pink, we want it to be red. Also, with this type of food coloring, when it's dark, if you let it sit for a little bit, especially if you put the batter in the refrigerator overnight, for cake batter or this, it'll brighten up the flavor. I mean, not brighten up the flavor, brighten up the color. The color will get darker. That was about a teaspoon and a half of the gel food coloring. And like I said, you can add to that to make it as dark as you want. Everything I'm doing, the basics are things that you have to follow, but other things that I'm adding on to it, you pretty much can add at your discretion, like how sweet you want it to be and how red you want it to be, how much cake you want to use in the crust. And as you notice, each time that I do mix, I don't turn the mixer on high. It's on number, actually on the stove. My kitchen man. All right. So that's done. So I'm gonna get us a thorough mix to make sure everything is mixed in here. And it is. So this is almost filled up to the top, which is cool. But I think I'm gonna add just a little bit more, which is gonna just be some regular batter, and just swirl it in there. All right, so as you can see, this is pretty much up to the top. So now what I'm gonna do is add water to the pan. And it's just about an inch of water, and then put it in the oven to bake on 350 for 1 hour. And in 1 hour, I will be back and we will check it. All right, guys, so this has been in the oven for 55 minutes. And it's probably gonna bake a little bit sooner than an hour, simply because of the fact that it has the cake underneath the bottom, which is a pretty thick layer. So you'll know when it's done, because obviously when you start smelling it, really smelling it, it'll be done. And then also it's gonna rise up, but then as it cools down, it's gonna fall a little bit. But you'll see, because it'll jiggle like this. If it jiggles like this, that means that it's done. And you just let it cool at room temperature for a couple hours, and then you put it in the refrigerator. I usually put mine in the freezer because they're easier to handle when you, just like the cakes are when you're taking them out of the pan. So in a couple hours, mine will go in the freezer, and then I'll come back and decorate it. I also forgot to tell you that you need some buttercream icing too. Or you can use whipped cream. I'm using buttercream. All right, guys, so the cheesecake has cooled down. Like I said, it would drop. And it's been in the freezer for a few hours. So now I'm just going to take it out and decorate it. All right, guys, so I have my toasted pecans that I've chopped, and I have my buttercream. So this will be pretty quick. You can decorate, put it on however you want. One thing that you don't want to do is to put a whole bunch. So if you pipe this on, it needs to be really light. Keep in mind, this is not a cake, so you don't want to have a whole bunch of icing on it. Some people make cheesecake, red velvet cheesecake cake, where they'll have the cheesecake in between 2 layers of the red velvet cake, and then they'll cover it with cream cheese icing, which is cool. That's another way to do it, but I like it very simple, like this, where you're actually getting the red velvet in the actual cheesecake. All right, so as you can see, how light that is. And I just sprinkle some pecans on top. And that's it, guys. My version of a red velvet cheesecake. And you see how that red got darker as it cooked inside. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, be safe.